Great. So our last contributed talk for this session is Can You Be More Polite and Positive, Infusing Social Language into Task-Oriented Conversational Agents by Yi-Chia Wang, Runze Wang, Gokhan, and Hugh Williams. And the talk will be given by Yi-Chia Wang.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to my talk. My name is Yi-Chia Wang. I'm a research scientist from Uber AI. Today, I'm going to talk about social language, how to infuse social language into task-oriented conversational agents. So this work kind of lie in between the intersect of HCI and conversational agent. So you might find that the way we are looking at this problem might be a little bit different than the usual conversational AI people do. Okay, so here will be today's outline. So I will firstly talk about social language in goal-oriented dialogue system, which will motivate us to propose two research questions and investigate into these two questions. In the first one, we are going to looking into the impact of social language on user engagement in task-oriented dialogue system, in task-oriented conversation. Okay, so to do that, we will conduct a statistical analysis on a real human-human conversation that actually would be the Uber driver partner and our customer support agent conversation. Sure. Okay. Yeah. And then after we demonstrating that social language actually is related to user engagement, the second part we are going to propose a model, a framework that is capable of injecting social language into agent response generated by our model. Okay. So at the end, I will conclude with the implication and future directions. So let's firstly talk about the motivation. So nowadays, conversational agents are becoming part of our life, and we all know that this kind of system usually fall into two categories: task-oriented dialogue system or chatbot. Sometimes we call them social bot. Usually, task-oriented dialogue system is designed to having interaction with user, retrieve information from them, and fulfill a specific kind of task, such as searching for a restaurant or searching for a movie. Okay. So on the other hand, chatbot is usually designed to mimic human-human conversation and aim to engage user in the conversation for as long as possible. Okay. So a typical example would be like Xiaoai's or Alexa Price that happened recently. So, so there have been researchers in the social bot area has been spent some efforts investigating the social capabilities in the social bot. Okay, so for example, Xiaoai is capable of showing empathy or caring. Okay, so however, there are really few studies examining the social capabilities of task-oriented dialogue system. So most of task-oriented dialogue systems are designed to deliver the right content. And rare people are thinking about that. For example, if my models deliver the same content, but in a very different way, or in a very different tone, whether that will change the outcome of the conversation, or even affect the success of the task. Okay. So looking into this example, so this is a conversation happened between Uber driver and our customer support agent. Okay, so our driver say that I need to do the inspection and looking for a place. And our agent have two ways to respond to it. Okay, so the first one, visit any one of these locations for a free inspection, or okay, I'll send you a link to the nearest free inspection location. While the first one is more like a direct comment, the second one seems more polite, right? So imagine if you are a driver and seeing which response you will prefer to see, the option 1 or option 2, okay? So, so if you see, like, and also when you see this kind of different agent response, which one will motivate you more to further interact with the dialogue system, okay? So last week, when I was preparing the slide, I saw this news come out from Google. So it says Google Assistant will now be nicer if you say please and thank you. Okay, so it's kind of like a signal that people in this area or researchers in this area are starting to notice that the social aspect of a task-oriented dialogue system. Okay. So there are two research questions we try to answer in this work. Firstly, can and how social language used by agents in task-oriented conversation affect users' engagement? Okay, so we are looking into a short-term engagement that will be responsiveness, driver responsiveness, and long-term engagement that would be the end of this conversation, whether the task is really complete or not. And so this is done before we do any modeling yet first, because we really want to make sure it's important social language can really change the outcome, right? Otherwise, it makes no sense to build any model, okay? So in the first part, we demonstrate that. So after that, we start to answer the other question that would be, can we inject a certain type of social language into the response generated by a conversational agent? So after talking this social language many times, then your question might be, what is social language? So according to Bloom and Leha, so language has three components. Form, that's represent the syntax or the word order, so it's usually about grammatical order, okay? So content, it's about semantics, meaning of words, okay? So you can talk about the same content, but in very different ways. That would be involve the use of language, okay, the third component, okay? So sometimes we call the use of language pragmatics or also social language. It is the rules for people to interact with each other for communication. So social science social science has demonstrated that social language is actually very important for interpersonal function. Okay, so humans have using different kinds of social language to maintain or to build interpersonal relationship, such as increasing their intimacy by self-disclosure or building common ground by small talk. So there are so many social language. How do we decide which one we are going to work on? Okay. So because I'm particularly interested in the customer support domain, so we decide to focus on politeness and positivity. Okay. So according to politeness theory, so politeness, people use politeness to save face. Okay. So more specifically, it helps to regulate the social distance between two parties and remove face threats from them, such as avoid them to feeling awkwardness or embarrassed. Okay. So because of that, we kind of hypothesized that a conversational agent which can respond in a polite way can actually protect user from losing face. So that means user will prefer to interact with a more polite agent. Okay. So positivity is contiguous and also lead to liking. So in that sense, user would prefer more to interact with a conversational agent using more positive language. Okay, that's our assumption. So then this leads to our first research question. To do that, we decide to looking into Uber driver partner onboarding process and data. Okay, so at Uber, when a driver sign up and they want to drive with us, before they can really take their first trip, there is an onboarding funnel they need to go through to submit a series of documents such as driver license or vehicle inspection, insurance information. Okay, so every time when the driver sign up, we pair each driver with a real human customer support agent. Okay, so the goal of this agent is to guide the driver through this onboarding process. And then we will consider the task is success if this lead to the driver to their first trip. Okay, so so we will focus on this problem, and then we collected 4 million onboarding message exchange between our driver partners and CSR. So when I see CSR here, then that means the real human agent. Okay. So to answer the first research question, we conducted statistical regression analysis to test whether social language used by our CSR can predict driver engagement. Okay, so to do that, given a CSR message, we extract the politeness level and positive sentiment from pre-trained classifier that has been developed by previous literature. Okay, so so now the input of this regression model would be the input features, sometimes we call them independent variables, would be politeness and positive sentiment score. Okay, and the model is set to predict user engagement, driver engagement. And here we operationalize driver engagement in terms of two metrics. One is short-term metrics, short-term engagement metrics. That would be driver responsiveness. Okay, so this output will be set to 1 if after a CSR send a message and the driver responds to this message within 24 hours. Okay, and then we also consider the long-term engagement metrics that would be whether the driver take their first trip within 1 week after they receive the CSR message. Okay. So this is the result of the regression analysis. And so you can see, so in the model, we also control for some control variables, such as where the driver signed up or like how many days since they signed up, because usually when a driver signed up for longer, they become more inactive if they really didn't go through this funnel. Okay, so we try to control for some basic information. And then here it shows that when CSR message has a higher level of politeness, then our driver is more likely to respond or complete their first trip. Okay, so this is significantly more. Okay, so when they receive 1 standard deviation more politeness in the message from CSR, then they're more likely to respond and also take the first trip. Okay, and then we found that positive sentiment is possibly correlated with driver first trip, but surprisingly, it negatively predicts driver responsiveness. That means when the message has higher positive sentiment, then our driver are less likely to respond. Okay, so we have an explanation about this. Okay, so every time when our driver reach a milestone in this onboarding funnel, such as submit their driver license, okay, or pass the vehicle inspection, then so we will send them a congratulation message. This kind of congratulation message usually have really high positive sentiment, but driver usually doesn't bother to reply to them. Okay, of course, we are also further investigating into this. So now we kind of know that social language is related to user engagement. The next question would be, is it possible that we can build a model that generate agent response with the desired level of politeness or positivity? Okay. So our idea and model is actually motivated by language style transfer literature, which is an emergent research topic in NLP. So language style transfer is to change the underlying style of a text while still preserving its content. Okay. So there have been some research in these 2-3 years developing a deep learning model to control specific style, such as sentiment, personality, and politeness. Okay. However, most of these models are usually trained or verified on a small synthetic data set. In this work, we are going to using the driver agent conversation that we collected for modeling. Okay, so here is the model architect of the baseline lexical model versus our proposed model. Okay, so on the left-hand side is the baseline model, which is a very typical sequence-to-sequence architect. It will take the driver message as input and then encode it, and the decoder will generate the agent corresponding response. Okay, it's a really typical one. And the only thing we propose to do is to insert a social language understanding layer in between the encoder and decoder. Okay, and so it will integrate the politeness and sentiment features with the lexical information. And the way we got all this politeness and sentiment feature, if you remember previously, we have this pre-trained politeness and sentiment classifier. So we use those classifier during training, then we get the score, politeness score and sentiment score from the agent response, and then use that for training. Okay. So during testing time, that means we can adjust this politeness level as we want, right? More polite or less polite. Okay. So you might wonder why we're using so simple architect. So we avoid using attention mechanism or more complicated model here because we kind of want to directly evaluate the impact of this social language understanding layers. And at the same time, I think it's also served as a proof of concept that it's possible we can put certain kind of social language in a generation model. Okay. So we firstly evaluate a model in terms of how well it can generate content, it can preserve the content, and then against the ground truth. We consider two metrics, BRU and word-to-vector similarity measures, while blue consider only the word surface overlapping. The word-to-vector similarity measures will compute the cosine similarity between the word-to-vector representation of the model-generated response and its corresponding ground truth. Okay, so both of the results show that the social model we propose can perform better on content preservation than the baseline model. Okay, so after that, we're starting to think about how we can evaluate social language in this response generated by the model. So we compare two responses generated by the social model. Okay, so the idea is we keep the driver message the same, and then we tune up, we kind of adjust the politeness level. And so we get two responses, right? One is unboosted. That would be the original level of the politeness from the CSR. And then we generate another response with this politeness features boosted one standard deviation, and then get another agent response. And we compare these two responses. So we firstly evaluated these two responses using an automatic approach by applying the politeness and sentiment classifier to rate both response. So the results show that the boosted response actually significant, the boosted response can significantly generate higher politeness and positivity score. Okay. Of course, we didn't stop there. We took these two responses and then also conducted human judgment. Okay, so we having the driver message is always the same, and then one is the original level of politeness, and then the other one has politeness level boosted by one standard deviation. We select on 200 of them, and then we ask 3 different crowd workers to rate each driver agent pairs in terms of these 3 questions. The first 2 questions basically try to evaluate how the naturalness of the response, because we don't want our agent response kind of go out of the context or out of scope. Okay, and the third question is to compare these 2 to see which one is more polite or not. Okay, so we take a majority vote of the 3 crowd workers for each of the 3 questions, and we found that there's a significant significant increase in the politeness level for boosted response. However, unfortunately, there is no difference. We found no difference between the unboosted and boosted response for the naturalness. That's the first 2 questions, and also the positive sentiment question. So I think one possibility is that because currently we only have 200 sampled, so that it's a relatively small sample. The other thing is we think there might be some confusion about our task, so we are currently in the process of refining this crowdsourcing task. Okay. So to conclude, in the first part, we kind of demonstrate that social language is related to user engagement in real-world goal-oriented conversation. And then we propose a model, a framework that shows it's possible that we can incorporate social language into agent response. Okay. So this work has some practical implication. We can utilizing the model to provide suggestion to our CSR so that they can respond quicker and adhere to the best practice, because users seems prefer more polite content. Okay. So there are some next steps, but the one I really want to emphasize is that if you remember, the first part of our study is actually, we found it based on human-human conversation, right? We never know that, we don't really know that when our users, knowing they are interacting with a bot, whether they really care about the bot is polite or not, okay? So maybe when they know they are bots, it doesn't matter. They just want to have the task done. So the next thing I really want to do in the future, potentially that can be do, is to conduct A/B tests that really have a bot that generate more polite versus less polite message, and see whether that's really affecting our outcome, okay? So here is the end of the talk. Thank you.
We have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. Okay, I saw the hand in the back first, so I'm gonna jog back there.
Hi, I have 2 questions. The first one is, maybe I don't get politeness, but if we have 2 questions, one which directly gives a link and one which just says the next thing, then isn't it just better that if we directly give the link, then that reduces the turn-taking behavior and that's directly accomplishes the task? Secondly, when you said the iteratorability, can you tell me a little bit more about it? Is it like just Cohen's kappa? Okay,
Yes, it's
that's it.
yeah, it's Gokhan's kappa. Yeah.
okay,
So
and-
because we have more than 2 raters, so then we take each pair of Gokhan's kappa and then average it.
Okay, and can you talk about the politeness part a little bit?
Sure, yes. So definitely I agree there would be some personal preference, right? So some people would prefer just have the task done. So I actually, so when my model generated those politeness outcome, and I look at it, I'm actually a little bit confused because I think it's about culture difference, because just like you say, for me, the first one seems